Hello and welcome back to the Keep Right On podcast, a podcast brought to you from Birmingham Live. Myself, Alex Dicken. I'm not joined this week by Brian Dick. He is away on holiday, so we have parachuted in Joseph Chapman to discuss the friendly against West Bromwich Albion on Saturday, the final pre-season friendly. Firstly, Chappers, how are you? All good?
I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me on.
No, it's perfect timing because we obviously both that game on Saturday, and that is going to make up the bulk of the start of this podcast. We're going to reflect on that, just to lay the table, and then we are going to talk about the new signing of Luke Harris on loan from Fulham, discuss injuries a little bit, and then obviously look ahead to Reading at the end of the week. Joe, a 4-1 win against Albion on Saturday is pretty resounding. Blues ending the pre-season campaign in perfect style. 5 straight wins for the first 11 that Chris Davies selected since that first game out in Austria 3 weeks ago. Were you impressed by Blues?
From my vantage point, yes, I was. I reflect now on the first half and thought that it was a relatively even game. Blues have scored a good goal and then conceded from a set piece. In the grand scheme of things, there's very, very little, I suppose, that can be taken out of results in pre-season. That said, you'd still rather win 4-1 than lose 4-1. So in that respect, they were impressive across the pitch. I thought their ability to capitalise on Albion's mistakes at the back was very, very impressive, because we're going to have a lot of situations in the new season, I imagine, with Blues, where they're going to have to break teams down. There might be matches where there'll be frustration. There'll be matches where chances don't come and flow throughout the course of any given match. So to know that they look razor sharp in front of goals, I think was very, very reassuring ahead of the big kickoff. Yeah, 3 goals and I think it was 11 or 12 minutes, wasn't it, that eventually saw Blues win the match. Chris Davies was keen to point out afterwards that 2 of those goals came as a result of pressing, and he constantly reinforces this idea of pressing to score to the players in training, and they did for those final 2 goals. Obviously, winning the ball back high up and a ball across to Christoph Clara, of all people, to head back across for Willem Willemsen to run through Alex Palmer and score that 3rd goal before the 4th goal, which again, probably a little bit of lax defending from Albion at the back, and Tyler Roberts nipped in and managed to tee up Alfie May. So, very good on that front. It was actually also nice to see Blues score a set-piece goal, because last season they were pretty wretched at set-piece. I think Stansfield might have scored one at Plymouth away around Christmas time, and the next was a second phase Ivan Sunjic goal against Coventry. So, 2 corner goals, I think, in the whole of last season for Blues. So it was an area where they were quite weak, but again, they were very small. So they've signed some sizable players during this summer. So they should be more of a threat from set pieces next season. Looking at a couple of the individuals on display. Christian Bielik, we might as well start with him, because obviously there was the injury to him just before half time. Went down after winning a challenge against Tom Fellows just inside the box. Seemed to land quite awkwardly on his shoulder and looked absolutely distraught as he was making his way off the field. Clearly, last pre-season game is not the time to get injured. But thankfully, we're going to come onto it in a little bit more depth later. It doesn't seem to be too serious. The guy who replaced him, Christoph Clara, making his, probably his longest appearance in front of the Blues fans since coming in from Darmstadt earlier this summer. He had a really, really solid game, didn't he? He got a goal and an assist not long after, and Blues didn't concede while he's on the pitch. Yeah, I think when you consider that it'll be judged in his own penalty area rather than the opposition's over the course of a season, you've got to bear that in mind. But I thought, he didn't give Josh Maja really a sniff throughout the course of the second half. Looked very, very assured. He's obviously somebody who you're not going to miss. His frame, he's a big guy, and I think when you're talking about set pieces there, that's another element of what Blues are after this season in terms of defending them, but also attacking them as well. They haven't had enough of a threat in the opposition penalty area from dead balls. So to have players like Clara, Willemsen to come into this team, it just adds another layer, I think, because everybody has talked up the technical quality of the signings that they've made, how good Hansen might look at times, how good Alfie May is in the final third. But actually, you need that physicality as well. And Chris Davies was very, very keen to point that out a couple of weeks ago when I covered you at Shrewsbury. And for every technical player and all these slight players as well. Talk about Luke Harris in a moment, but actually you still need that steel as well, because League One can be a scrap. It's going to be a situation where there'll be teams that are just offering Blues a totally different challenge to what they've come up against. I would think in the last few years, where they've kind of gone into a lot of championship games on an even keel with the opposition. Have tried to develop, have tried to kind of broaden their footballing philosophies under various managers, but this is very much going to be a case of Blues versus the rest of League One. And they're still going to need the best of both. And I think you can see that all the way through their recruitment, that they've kind of ticked off a lot of boxes. So that's very, very reassuring. But yeah, Claire is, I think he looks a real unit. I mean, to be playing in the Bundesliga 1 year against the likes of Harry Kane, and then next, to be pitching up at Blues and not even being guaranteed a starting 11 spot. That's the other crazy thing about it, is that it's the sheer depth of this squad now as it is as well, because Dion Sanderson's had a very, very good pre-season. So, it's I think there was a lot of relief on social media on Sunday when Bielik posted that photo of himself and that message, just to say it's not as bad as everybody thinks, or maybe as much as he worried it was going to be in the first instance. But that said, it was still very, very promising to see Clara put in a performance like that against a team that are going to be playing in a division higher than Blues this season. Yeah,
very much so. And you mentioned that the height there, it is like kind of they've won all the other, isn't it, this season? They've got those diminutive players they had last season, but not in such great volume. And then they've got like the land of the giants, haven't they? A bunch of 6'2", 6'3" guys who hopefully will be able to combat the physical threat that's obviously going to arrive against Blues in League One. Moving on to another player who we've spoken about quite a bit this pre-season, mainly because I think of the way it ended last season for him, in that it was quite poor, and that we thought maybe he might move on, but the signs are that Chris Davies wants to keep him around at the moment. Siriki Dembele, he started his second successive pre-season game, having played the previous game against Walsall. Seems to just have the edge on Emil Hansen at the moment. Another one, Joe, very impressive against Albion at the weekend.
Yeah, I really, really enjoyed the fact that he was able to run so directly with the ball. He looked really quite dynamic, actually, and tried to make things happen. And I know that there'll always be a stick to beat him with as regards to his defensive duties. And there have been times when he's cost Blues, and times when his fullback probably hasn't thanked him for the lack of help at times. But ultimately, Siriki Dembele was signed by Blues to impact games in the final third. And I think as long as you can kind of meet him halfway as regards to what Chris Davies will be asking of him, what John Eustace asked of him last season, I think you can. There's an exceptional League One winger in there at the very least. The reason that he earned a move up towards the top of the Championship to Bournemouth in the first place was because of what he was doing in League One. And again, you talk about Hansen the other day at Shrewsbury. I'd have to say, when the switch was made in the second half, I thought Blues looked far more dangerous in that moment. I know Hansen's getting himself up to speed in English football, but I thought Dembele immediately made more of an impact in the second half, and I would agree that at this moment in time, Dembele is probably in line to start that first game of the season against Reading. So I think, he's one of those guys, when you look back at the end of the season, you were at the awards night, Alex, and there were a handful of players that didn't turn up, and you kind of had that feeling that maybe Dembele just wasn't going to be interested in playing League One. But you move it on a couple of months, and on the eve of the season, he's probably in your starting 11 for the first game. So that speaks volumes about the pre-season he's had. And I think he wouldn't be somebody who'd be rushing out of the door either at Blues. He's somebody who could be a real weapon, I think, in this league. And if an offer comes and a move comes and Blues have to consider it, then that Blues are in a position where they can go and find another player, and there is still as an attractive a proposition as League One's probably ever had.
Yeah, definitely. You said Dembele is exceptional in League One. I'd probably argue that he's exceptional in the Championship at the start of last season when used correctly, or used in the way that he wanted to be used. I think, like you say, he is going to have to meet Chris Davies halfway and actually do the defensive side of the game. And I was quite impressed with that against Albion, because I think early on, Cochrane was had two players running towards him, and Dembele head back into position and actually helped him see out the danger on one occasion. And second half again, he tucked in nicely in front of Cochrane and really, really shored things up. So if he is going to do that part of the game, then I don't see how he can't be in the Blues 11 because of how talented he is going the other way. Obviously, Emil Hansen wasn't signed to sit on the bench, but like Chris Davis keeps saying, Blues are going to have 60 plus games this season, so there's going to be enough games to go around, isn't it? Dembele's not going to play 60, he might play 40, and Hansen will get the other 20, 25 games while his minutes off the bench. So, definitely enough minutes to go around given all the competitions that Blues are going to be in this season. Actually, two more players that I want to talk about, but the other one who pipped Dembele to man of the match for me was Alfie May. 5 goals in 6 pre-season matches, 2 against Albion, that final friendly. He just scores goals, doesn't he? Especially in League One. He's a solid bet if you're looking for a Golden Boot winner, I'd say. And he's not just the goals though, and the way he links the play, the way he roams around the field. Chris Davis made the point to me earlier in pre-season that he doesn't want a number 9 that stands there and occupies centre backs. Blues don't have a player playing up against centre backs at all, do they? And 1 minute he's on a kind of right back position, next minute he's collecting the ball from the central midfield players, the next minute he's in the box ready to take a shot on. So he's a pretty much all action, free roaming centre forward, and Blues fans are loving him already. No surprise, because he works really hard and scores goals.
Yeah, that's absolutely crucial. That was one thing as well. Is if you can capitalise on defensive errors the way he has, he just showed in those snippets in the game on Saturday against Albion that he's razor sharp. He doesn't need too many opportunities to impact games, which is his conversion rate is absolutely superb. So I think that was probably one of the smartest bits of business. It seems really obvious, but I mean, how many times have Blues had a 20-plus goal scorer in their team in the last 20 years? I can only think of Shea Adams, and that was for a single year. And he hasn't done that since, I don't think. So that was the first thing they had to go. You can go and identify the fact that they need more midfield steel, they need more numbers at the back, they need a new goalkeeping department. But having let go of Scott Hogan, they needed somebody who knew the league. And the one thing as well that I think is quite promising about Alfie May's record is that he's done it for Charlton in a very decent performing type team in League One, but then he's also scored a lot of goals in League One in a struggling team and kept Cheltenham up as well. So he's been able to kind of manoeuvre League One in all different kind of teams. And now he's got the supply line and the players around him that he'll have been dreaming about his whole career, I'd have thought. In terms of the players who are going to be laying on a plate for him, he's still very much the number one. And I know that if that Blues sign another centre forward or somebody who is similarly in that ilk, then May's probably still going to be first choice. He's the number 9 that as reigning League One Golden Boot holder is best placed. I think it was a very, very smart piece of business, I think, that Blues have done. It
was, and when you look at the imagination's gone into a lot of the other signings they've made this summer. Players coming in from the Eredivisie, players coming from kind of lower Premier League clubs, and young talented players. And then you kind of looked at the most obvious signing you can make as a League One club with a lot of money, and that's Alfie May, and you've made it. So but different signings will create a winning team, and I suppose May is someone that has over the last 3 seasons guaranteed you an average of 22 goals. So hopefully he can do the same again. Final player, one of the other signings I want to pick out is Mark Leonard, because I hadn't seen any of him in games, because obviously I was at the Walsall game where the first 11 were the week before, and Leonard was at the Aldershot game. He only played, I think, for 25 minutes or so, but he looked really tidy. I think there was one instance when he came on and Blues pressed high and lost the ball. Rather than let Albion get out, they pressed it back and won it back, and Leonard took it off. I think it might have been Hegem on the left-hand side before playing back into midfield, showing the ability to win the ball back, as well as obviously quality on the ball, which we know he has. Just goes to show the strength in depth Blues have got in midfield. Is he someone who impressed you in that first? I know it's only 25 minutes, but did you get a good vibe from him, Joe, as well?
Yeah, I don't think it's a coincidence that the goals came after he was introduced, even from deep, even though he didn't have a role in them. directly. As you say, he just reinforced that pressing approach, I think. And, if you're from an Albion point of view, you can blame defensive errors and mistakes that were made by individuals. But as you've already said, I think the fact that Blues were able to kind of force those errors in the first place, and Leonard was very much a part of that. Fresh legs, somebody who's trained all pre-season, he's come in, he's ready to go. Knows League One as well. A very, very smart sign, I think, in the sense that he was somebody who would appear to have a very big future, and yet has racked up a lot of senior appearances already. Somebody who, how many players come out of Brighton at all various points in their careers and go on to have huge success elsewhere. So, there's no reason why Leonard can't tear it up in League One again in an even better team. I just wonder what the axis will be, on Saturday. I think that's probably, for me, the one obvious decision that Davis still has to make. I think we've already touched on. I think you could argue Dembele has nailed a place down. I think Bielik and Sanderson are going to be two players that start on Saturday. Laird and Cochrane. I think the one decision he's going to have to make, I think, will be whether he goes with Leonard, whether he goes with. Well, I don't know. Thing is, who are you going to take out?
I'm smiling because you've practically ruined the last segment of the podcast there. Did you not look at the running order, Joe?
Not all the way down. No.
Yeah. Moving on to the next point, Joe. Luke Harris signing on loan from Fulham for the season. A player who was highly sought after, had a really good spell second half of last season with Exeter City in League One, 4 goals in 21 appearances in League One, 19 of which were starts. Can play in the 8 or 10 positions. I was reading a little bit about him on Fulham's website earlier, and they say he models his game on Frank Lampard. Obviously, the pinnacle of goal-scoring midfielders in English football, I suppose, so he's not a bad person to model your game on. A Wales under-21 international, has been called up to the senior squad in the past couple of times, so you'd think that a senior call-up isn't far away, or a debut isn't far away. It seems like again, we're talking about midfielders, Joe, and the Blues midfield, if we're looking, I suppose, at the kind of players who can play a little deeper, it's absolutely stacked, isn't it? You've got Peck, who's, somehow Peck, Brian and I have been joking that he might be the best player to ever play in League One, a South Korea international at the peak of his powers. Jordan James, a Wales international. There obviously is a little bit of doubt about his future at the moment. Mark Leonard, as we've just spoken about, very good, has probably in his own right completed League One last year with Northampton and maybe could have gone higher in the Championship. There's plenty of interest there. Mm-hmm. And obviously now Luke Harris, another player, again, Championship interest, did very well in League One last year, scored a good number of goals. It's absolutely stacked, isn't it?
I think the utopian scenario for a team like Blues, who have got the resources to go and do this kind of recruitment drive, is that you have 2 players and 2 very good players in every single position. And obviously there are still holes to plug between now and the 30th of August. Probably, I don't know, I suppose another right back.
Yeah, definitely.
And another centre forward of sorts, I would have thought. Depending on Lukas Djukovic's role in the squad, I think it will be a bit of a more subdued one this year. So that considered, they're not far away. They've obviously made huge strides in the last month, 6 weeks in terms of recruiting. They're almost there, aren't they? That's what it feels like. Harris will come in and play, trying to compete with a role for Willemsen, I suppose, and also, as you say, in regards to the way he's been described as a Frank Lampard type player, maybe have the opportunity to play a little bit deeper, who can then maybe arrive onto the edge of the penalty area, if that's the way you play. There's
been a lot of conversation about formations this pre-season with Chris Davis, and I've looked at it various times in various different games, and it's very hard to pinpoint what they are actually playing in terms of a framework. It's probably a 4-2-3-1 framework, but there's so much kind of movement. It's almost impossible to pin it down to just one formation. I think Chris Davis would probably call it a 4-3-3, and at times you do see you've got very high wingers. Yes, on the ball, Miyoshi will tuck inside a lot and allow Laird to bomb on. You obviously got the centre forward, who is Alfie May, and then in midfield, you've almost got Peck sitting. Jordan James plays slightly ahead of him, and then Willemsen plays slightly ahead of him. So, but at times Willemsen goes beyond May and becomes the striker in the 11 as well. So there is a hell of a lot of rotation, a hell of a lot of flexibility. If I'm looking at Luke Harris, I'm probably saying he is rivaling Jordan James for that role alongside Peck. Slightly ahead of Peck, not the holding midfield player, but probably not the number 10 who occasionally becomes the number 9, which is what Willemsen has been doing, and what Tyler Roberts will do as well, I suppose.
Well, that's the other thing I was going to say is that you've got Roberts, you've got Keshi Anderson, Ramel Donovan. They've all played in slightly different roles in pre-season because of the numbers and because of the need to play minutes has overtaken the need for Davies to see them in their optimum position. So I thought Roberts looked good on Saturday when he came on. Again, somebody who has a really, really strong League One track record from years gone by, and
about 6 years ago.
Yeah, but even then, he's still at a good age, isn't he? He's somebody who you think is going to be very, very useful. And actually, I thought he played very well playing deeper. When I watched him at Shrewsbury, him and Anderson played a little bit further ahead, and Roberts, I thought, actually played very, very well there. One of the more experienced players, I suppose. It's quite a young team, isn't it, really, if you look around? In certain areas, or certainly inexperienced as regards to English football and League One football, Roberts looks very much at home at wherever you're putting him at the minute.
Yeah, I'd say Roberts has got such quality, especially in League One, that you probably can play him a little bit deeper. He's obviously got the football intelligence to play there as well. I think it's probably been more of a case of needs must in pre-season just to get players minutes, and Roberts is probably better suited to a central midfield position than Ramel Donovan, for instance. But I said it on the last podcast with Brian that I just think if Tyler Roberts gets himself fit for 2 or 3 months and stays fit and increases that match sharpness, I don't see how he doesn't get into the 11. We saw how good he was at times last season. I always hark back to that Coventry game where he was absolutely brilliant. We saw how good he was in the Premier League for Leeds. We saw how good he was top end Championship for Leeds as well under Bielsa. So I think Roberts could have a real impact this season, especially in League One. He was fantastic at 17, 18 when he was at Walsall and Oxford in League One. So and I think get us back at Shrewsbury as well. Maybe I might be wrong there. I think it was Oxford and Walsall. But yeah, Roberts can have a big say this season and a big role. Moving on from Harris onto the injury latest. Obviously, there was a lot of hearts in mouths when Bielik went down. But as we both kind of alluded to, he has put a post out just to reassure people that it's not as bad as first feared, and that he should be okay. So we're kind of working on the assumption that he'll be okay for the first game of the season. We'll obviously get the update from Chris Davies on Thursday, I think, at the press conference. I think it'll be Thursday this week, press conference in Henley. But there was bad news on the injury front. Lee Buchanan, who suffered a calf injury against Aldershot in that friendly on July 27th, he's going to be out for 6 to 8 weeks. Chris Davies said after the game that he will not be able to train for around 6 weeks, and that probably means 2 months out. So we're probably looking at end of September-ish by the time Lee Buchanan is back in matchday squads. It is a significant blow, and Chris Davies called it a significant blow. But it would be bigger if Alex Cochrane wasn't performing so well at left back. And another summer signing, Joe, and I know he really caught your eye in the friendly of the weekend.
Yeah, I think probably as strong as Blues looked in the final third, and as comprehensive as the victory was, I actually thought Cochrane stood out at left back. I've had a look at him at Shrewsbury, and even in the small time, I thought he's really come on. And the dynamic, the relationship between left back and winger will be interesting to see, because Blues are going to have lots of the ball, you would imagine, in a lot of matches. And we've touched on Dembele's deficiencies defensively. So if Cochrane's halfway up the pitch, as he seems to be plenty, then that's just a hole on the pitch I think the Blues are going to have to plug sometimes. But I thought the way he bounded forwards, he was really, really direct when he had the ball at his feet, looked comfortable travelling with the ball at pace. Delivery was good. I think he's a very, very smart signing. Again, the ones that Blues have made that are going out of their way to sign, players that wouldn't maybe have been expected in at the beginning of the season, at the beginning of the summer. Cochrane, Leonard. You would hope that Harris would be in that similar mould of young British player that is ready for League One football. I think he's a very, very good player, and I don't think that Buchanan would have it all his own way anyway. It's really hard to know, to be honest, whether if Lee Buchanan's playing all the way through pre-season and is doing really well, somebody who a lot of Blues fans at the back end of last season would have said he's going to be a real, big player for us in League One. You're getting into the start of the season, even if Buchanan was fit, there's absolutely no guarantees he'd be first choice anyway. The only thing you've now got to think of is that if we're talking now at the end of September, early October, and Buchanan's still out or is about to come back, does that change Davis's, Craig Gardner's recruitment? Do you kind of then go and look, or do you look within and ask a Brandon Keller or someone like that to fill in? Because you've seen a lot of that in pre-season. Yeah,
that's the thing, isn't it? So obviously a right back is high on their priority list to get a competitor for Laird. When you think Ethan Laird's an outstanding right back, but he only played 25 league games last year, so he's effectively missed the half of the season, which is why they had Cody Drameh, and he was able to get enough minutes himself to satisfy his need for action. You can't, as much as we would love Ethan Laird to get through 40, 50 games, you can't guarantee that based on his recent injury record. So they're right to look for a new right back, and that would free up Laird occasionally to go and play at left back as well if they need him to. He did that role very well for Tony Mowbray last year. So a right back who could potentially allow Laird to go left occasionally would be good. But going back to Keller, he's had a really good pre-season in my eyes. I know he's not played a lot of the minutes, but I think in training, I know he's impressed, and also he's really kind of proven to us all that if Blues need somebody to fill in almost any position, he can do it. We know he's traditionally a central midfield player, but he's played as a number 10 in the past in pre-season matches. He's played wide in those games, and this year I don't think he's played in midfield or in the forward areas. I think he's been exclusively used in defence. So he played at right back, he played at left back in a training game I saw last week, and obviously I think he played at centre back in one of the games, maybe at Solihull Moors. So and at Walsall, I think he played at centre back too. So yeah, Mr. Versatile for Blues under Davies, and that's how he's going to get minutes at this age, isn't it? He's 19, coming 20 or whatever. Wants minutes in the first team at Blues, and that is how he's going to get them. Because as things stand, I would say Brandon Keller is third choice fullback with Buchanan injured, and there being no deputy to Laird at right back.
Yeah, I think he looks a player that's benefited from his loan spell as well, Keller.
Massively does, yeah. Agree with that. Finally, if Chappers hasn't already ruined this segment, we'll talk about who plays against Reading. Obviously, the big kickoff in the League One season this weekend. 5:30 kickoff on Sky Sports at St Andrews at United Park. Joe, there's not really a debate to be had as far as goalkeeper goes anymore, I think. No. Bailey Peacock-Farrell has seemingly won that battle. I feel like it's going to be a live contest throughout the season, but given the fact he's played the last two friendlies, when you think of it has been the first 11, hasn't it? Let's face it. And he's been ahead of Allsop, so we expect him to start in goal. Ethan Laird, Dion Sanderson, Christian Bielik and Alex Cochrane. I would expect to be the back four, providing Bielik is fit. Although it does feel a little bit harsh on Clara because, let's face it, he helped the team to a clean sheet while he was on the field against Albion, scored a goal, made a goal. But Christian Bielik is the new captain of Birmingham City. If he's fit, he's obviously going to start. Midfield, we spoke about this, and this is probably a question mark. So Peck, I think, is a guaranteed starter, and then it's who plays alongside him in that second 8 role. Jordan James has started the pre-season games. Mark Lendy is now in the building. Who is your money on, Joe?
For me, it'll be James. I think the general rule or the general pattern of transfer windows, especially in Blues' position where they had so much business to do, is that you go and sign the players that are going to be starting 11 players. I think the players that have arrived a bit later on, players like Leonard, and Harris are going to basically complement what they've got now, and be the players who are asked to come and make an impact off the bench, or the rotation kind of players. Whereas players like Willemsen, Alfie May, are very much, for me, just guaranteed starters now. You've got an interesting battle at left back when Buchanan's back, but now you've got no qualms with Cochrane playing there at all. And then I think the other thing as well, if Blues are able to do those deals as they have done, Leonard and Harris, and the players that they can rely on to come off the bench and to keep the starting 11 on their toes throughout the course of the first few weeks of the season, then I don't foresee a situation where, at least from the off, that the midfield isn't just going to be Peck and James, because that's an unenviable task that Leonard's got to get into that team at the minute, I would suggest. That for me, that's the strongest League One midfielders you're going to get, I think, probably in modern history.
It'd be a decent Championship midfield, to be fair. I don't think they played together an awful lot last season, or at all. James, when Peck came in, James often played wide left. I think the only way that could change is if a bid came in for James this week, and it was something that Blues were happy with and that James wanted to pursue. Obviously, we know there are a number of Premier League and top-end Championship sides looking at Jordan James, and obviously there is that possibility that he could leave before the transfer window closes. But again, there is that big possibility that he stays, which is why Chris Davies has used him so heavily in pre-season. And Jordan James he's not the sort to kick up a stink and cause problems. He's been acting professionally throughout this whole kind of saga, I suppose. Dating back to January when there were, I believe, 3 bids from Serie A side of Atalanta. So if there is no bid, no change in that situation, I think Jordan James will edge out Mark Leonard and play alongside Peck. Moving on to the front four, I think we can say Alfie May as the striker is probably set in stone. Koji Miyoshi has played every pre-season game, so we can probably presume he is going to play on the right. Willemsen, probably again going to be number 10. I don't think there's much doubt about that. The only other question mark, I think, probably the biggest question mark in the team is who plays left wing. And Siriki Dembele does seem to have wrestled that shirt back from Emil Hansen.
For me, what I've seen of the pair of them, specifically what I've seen of Dembele, and I think there tend to be clues at the very back end of pre-season as well as regards to squad selection. I think that normally is a nod to what the manager's got planned the week after. So for me, it's Dembele's shirt to lose at the moment. Yeah,
100%. I think that is just about it, Joe. Thank you for coming on. Just to let everyone know, we have got a predictions podcast coming later this week. That was recorded by myself and Brian. So you can, go and watch that and tell us how wrong we are or whatever, and save the clips and show us them when we're wrong at the end of the season. Hopefully, for Blues' sake, we're not wrong too many times. I'll leave that clue there. Thank you, Joe. Thanks everyone for listening and watching. If you watch on YouTube, please subscribe or leave a comment, and we'll try and discuss whatever it is on the next podcast. And obviously, same again on Spotify and all your podcast platforms. I will just finish the podcast by saying a big keep right on.